Alright, so we've got the chassis mostly welded up. Metal's arrived for the front end, so that's what we're going to start on now, is how we're going to mount these front wheels. Now, what I plan on doing is having one of these bars underneath, about there, one of them coming over the top, somewhere around sort of that, with a wheel sitting on the end down here. Now, I've got some bearings, which are these sort of flat cast down encased bearings. They're going to bolt onto here, and then this bearing will bolt through to the chassis, so the whole thing can tip and twist around this front axle. Now, I'm hoping all this is going to be strong enough. It's a bit of a delve into the unknown, but I think let's build it, see what it looks like, see how it performs, and then if we need to change it, we will do. So front structure's all welded up now, and welds don't look terrible. They're all right. Had some gaps to fill on these bits, but it's all right. It was strong enough. I was worried about how strong this part would be, but now it's all welded together. It's absolutely rock solid, so we're pretty happy with that. Next thing to do is to get these bearings mounted. Now, I don't want to just drill through this stuff because it's quite relatively thin sidewall. I don't want to just put a bolt through and just end up squishing it when I tighten these down. So what I want to do is turn on the lathe some inserts that I'll drill through here and weld them in, and then we can thread them as well, and then just bolt straight into there to mount these bearings. And obviously it's important we need to get these straight, so what I think I'll also do is turn a bar that's going to go through both of these bearings, and then it'll hold these two parallel. I can make them straight along this back edge and then mark out the holes as to where to get these put in, and then we can figure out how we're actually going to mount this onto the cart. But the main thing is just to get all this structure put together and then get these mounted, and then we'll have a look at that in a second. All right, so 4 washers, so well, not really sure what you call them, but spacers, they drop into the frame now in there, sit nice and flush. Anyway, poke all them in, I'll get them welded in now, then we can get the bearings mounted. All right, so that's got our holes I suppose the bushing things going all the way through there, welded in. I've ground them down as well, so we can see how it's going to look. The bolts I've got unfortunately aren't long enough to get all the way through, but obviously these the bearings sit on there, and the bolts will go through. So I've got 2 of them on, so you can now see how it's going to pivot. Obviously a wheel on either end, and then we're going to pivot this part attached to the cart, and then this means we can pivot all around this front axle. So I've drilled these holes here rather than 12mm, they're 12.5, so it allows a tiny bit of backwards and forwards in the movement of the bearing. And then obviously we've still got these elongated holes in the bearing, so we can move these left and right as well still. So there's some adjustment in there, so if it's not all perfect, it should still pivot well. So next step is sort of offering this up to the cart really, and seeing how we're actually going to mount these bearings onto the cart, onto the front rail. Now we're going to have to cut this away somewhere, this lower rail, to get the bearings to fit in. So our plan is to cut a small section of this away that I can then slot in some tubing into here. And the reason I had to lower this diameter is this is 22mm tubing, but the bearings I've got a 20mm diameter on the inside, so I need to lower this from 22 to 20mm, and somehow create an insert that will go in here that can then bolt the bearing into. So we'll have a look at that and see if we can get the front axle fixed in place. So after some umming and ahhing about how I'm actually going to bridge this gap, what I come up with is this. The idea is this slots in there, takes a bit of persuasion, but slots down in there. Once that's in, get the bearing. Got bearing slots on the end in here, and then it's tapped on the end with a bolt, which will go through there. And that holds the bearing solidly onto there. So then we can offer up the axle and then mount that. So that's how that's going to pivot and turn. I think it's going to be all right. Obviously this one needs to go further in. I think it's going to be strong enough. There's going to be another one on the other side, but I'll get another one of these made, offer it up, and see what I think, how strong it's going to be. All right, so that was a lot of work to get that front end in and mounted, but I think it's going to be plenty strong enough. Looking at it, it looks fine. So now we can get a sense of how this thing's going to actually work. So the idea is the chassis is going to roll over the back wheel, so you'll be able to tilt this thing into corners. It probably won't end up having quite this much tilt in the final version, but it's got plenty. It's got plenty more than I thought I'd probably get, so it's pretty good. Just gotta mess about with the sort it all out, get it all sort of straight and things. But it's pretty cool. You now get a real good example of what this thing's actually going to be like when you start riding it. So that's really good. I'm really happy to see it come out of this. So next time we'll look at getting the rear wheel mounted and see where it's all going to sit, how it's all going to sit level. And we also need to work out how we're going to mount then the front wheels on this, so that they also pivot with the chassis, so the whole thing rolls, and get some of the final welding bits done up on this, and just start on some more little bits. But excellent. Thanks for watching. See you all in the next one.